Ladies and gentlemen, listen closely, because this is not just a talk. This is a call to action. We all want success. We all dream of change. But let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear. Desire alone won't get you there. Wishing won't get you there. Hoping won't get you there. What you need, what separates the extraordinary from the ordinary, is drive. Drive is not motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. Drive is deeper. Drive is the fire in your gut that keeps burning long after the excitement fades. Drive is the relentless commitment to push forward even when you're exhausted, when you've failed, when nobody believes in you, not even yourself. Think about it. How many times have you started something with energy only to stop when it got tough? That's the moment where most people quit. But those who win, those who achieve, are the ones who lean into the resistance. They say, this pain, this fear, this obstacle, it's fuel. Drive is what makes you get up earlier than everyone else. Drive is what makes you stay later, push harder, demand more of yourself when no one is watching. Drive is what makes you raise your standards, because you know deep down that your life will only change when you change. Here's the truth, you will never rise higher than the standard you demand of yourself. If you demand comfort, you'll get comfort and stay stuck. If you demand growth, you'll get growth, and with it, the life you've been chasing. So let me ask you, what do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? Do you want to be telling the same story? Or do you want to be living in a new chapter that you created with your own two hands, fueled by your drive? Because life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you're willing to fight for, bleed for, and never give up on. So today, right here, right now, make a decision, not a wish, not a hope, a decision. Decide that you will not settle. Decide that you will not give up. Decide that your drive will carry you through every setback, every challenge, every so-called limit. Stand tall. Own your power, because you have everything it takes. You just need the drive to unlock it. Now go out there and create the life you were meant to live. Drive is deeper than motivation. Most people confuse the two, and that confusion keeps them trapped in cycles of starting and stopping, beginning with passion and then falling flat when the energy fades. Motivation is like a spark. It feels exciting in the moment. It gives you a rush of adrenaline. It makes you believe for a brief time that you can conquer the world. But sparks die out if there's no fuel. Motivation alone cannot carry you through the nights when you're exhausted, when failure feels heavier than your shoulders can bear, when the people around you doubt your vision and remind you of every reason it won't work. Drive is different. Drive is what remains after the spark fades. Drive is the fuel, the ongoing force, the relentless push that keeps you moving even when nothing around you seems to reward your effort. It is not about feeling good. It is not about waiting for inspiration. It is about a decision that no matter how difficult it becomes, you are going to keep going. Think about all the times in your life when you felt motivated. Maybe you listened to a powerful talk. Maybe you read a book. Maybe someone told you that you had potential. In that moment, you felt unstoppable. You started the workout program. You opened the business plan. You reached out to that person you had been afraid to call. And then what happened? Life happened. Resistance showed up. You felt tired. You faced rejection. You got distracted. That's when the motivation drained out of you like air from a balloon. If all you had was motivation, you quit. You told yourself the timing wasn't right, or maybe it just wasn't meant to be. But if you had drive, if you had that unshakable commitment, you pushed through anyway. Drive is what allows you to keep swinging when the bat feels heavy and you're striking out. Drive is what forces you to keep climbing even when the mountain seems endless. Drive comes from something deeper than feelings. Feelings are temporary. Drive is anchored in purpose. When you are clear about why something matters, when it's tied to who you are at your core, you don't stop just because you don't feel like it. You don't need to feel inspired to follow through. You don't need to be in the mood to put in the work. Drive is about creating the mood by acting. It's about showing up regardless of how you feel. It's about saying, I said I would do this, and I will, whether I feel excited or not. That level of consistency is what separates people who achieve lasting success from people who just chase temporary highs. Motivation is external. It comes from outside stimuli. Drive is internal. It comes from within. When you rely only on motivation, you become dependent on constant stimulation. You need another speech, another quote, another reminder. You're chasing energy instead of creating it. But when you have drive, you generate your own energy. You wake up with a sense of responsibility, a sense of urgency. You don't wait for the world to hand you encouragement. You become your own source of fuel. You understand that the world doesn't owe you enthusiasm, and if you want something, you have to find a way to keep moving toward it regardless of who's cheering for you. Drive is what makes the difference between people who live lives of quiet regret and those who create legacies. Every person who ever achieved greatness had moments of weakness, days when motivation was nowhere to be found. But their drive kept them alive in the game. When the excitement of the beginning was gone, when the applause faded, when the critics laughed at them, their drive spoke louder than the noise. Drive is what makes you wake up at 5 in the morning to practice when everyone else is still asleep. Drive is what makes you keep sending proposals after dozens of rejections. Drive is what forces you to adapt, to learn, to grow, to evolve, even when it would be easier to just quit. Drive does not care about convenience. It does not care about comfort. It only cares about the outcome, and it demands that you rise above excuses. Motivation is fragile. It disappears at the first sign of discomfort. Drive endures. It tells you that pain is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. Drive is what gives meaning to sacrifice. It turns obstacles into stepping stones, not walls. It takes the word impossible and reframes it as a challenge, not a verdict. Drive doesn't ask, do I feel like doing this today? It asks, is this necessary for the vision I've committed to? If the answer is yes, then it's done. No discussion, no negotiation. Every time you rely on motivation, you gamble with your future because feelings cannot be trusted to stay consistent. You will not always wake up feeling powerful. You will not always want to get out of bed. You will not always feel confident. And if your progress is dependent on those feelings, your progress will be inconsistent, unstable, fragile. Drive is the antidote. Drive gives you stability because it removes feelings from the equation. It says, whether I feel strong or weak, I will move forward. Whether I feel certain or doubtful, I will act. Whether I feel encouraged or alone, I will not stop. That level of persistence compounds over time. It doesn't look glamorous in the moment. It's not the big burst of energy that motivation provides, but over weeks, months, years, it builds an unstoppable momentum. When people look at high achievers, they often think it must be motivation that keeps them going. They think those people wake up every day feeling inspired, feeling ready, feeling powerful. But if you ask them, they would tell you the truth. They don't always feel like it. They just don't allow those feelings to dictate their actions. They built habits around their drive. They made the decision once and keep living it daily. That's why they succeed. Not because they are more talented, not because they are more gifted, but because they are more driven. Drive comes from deciding that quitting is not an option. Drive comes from deciding that circumstances will not dictate the outcome of your life. Drive comes from deciding that your goals, your dreams, your vision are not negotiable. And once you've made that decision, you no longer wait for motivation to push you forward. You push yourself forward regardless of what motivation you feel in the moment. Pain and obstacles are fuel. Most people spend their lives running away from pain, trying to avoid challenges and building their days around comfort. They see obstacles as roadblocks and pain as punishment. But the truth is, pain is the most powerful teacher, and obstacles are the very things that shape you into the person capable of carrying the life you say you want. Every breakthrough is born from resistance, not ease. Every transformation happens because something was difficult, not because it was simple. The people who rise to extraordinary levels of success are not the ones who had no problems. They are the ones who decided that problems would not stop them but strengthen them. Think about a muscle. If you never put it under stress, if you never load it with weight, it stays weak. The muscle only grows when it is pushed to the edge of its capacity, when it is forced to endure stress, when the fibers tear and then repair themselves stronger than before. Life is no different. The weight you resist is the weight that builds you. The struggles you try to avoid are the very struggles that make you resilient, resourceful, relentless. Pain is not a signal to stop. Pain is a signal that growth is happening. Pain means you are stepping beyond your comfort zone into territory where new strength is forged. Most people think they want an easy life. They imagine that freedom means the absence of struggle. But what they really want is not ease. It is growth, and growth never comes without resistance. Look back at the defining moments in your life. The times you changed, the times you became stronger, wiser, more determined. Did any of those moments come when everything was smooth, when nothing was wrong, when you were comfortable? No. They came when something broke, when something hurt, when you faced an obstacle that demanded more of you than you thought you had to give. That pain, that obstacle became the turning point. Obstacles force you to find out who you really are. Anyone can smile when things are easy. Anyone can take action when the path is clear. But who are you when nothing is working? Who are you when your plans collapse? When people say no, when doors slam in your face, that is when your character is revealed. That is when drive is tested. Obstacles strip away your illusions and confront you with the truth. Are you committed, or are you just interested? Do you really want it, or did you just want it when it was convenient? If you have drive, obstacles become fuel, not barriers. Every gnaw feeds your hunger for the eyes. Every setback sharpens your focus. Every pain becomes proof that you are on the right path because it means you are not standing still. Pain has a way of breaking down what no longer serves you. It dismantles old beliefs, weak habits, weak excuses. It burns away the comfort that was keeping you stagnant. Pain forces you to change, to adapt, to dig deeper than you ever thought possible. When you embrace pain instead of avoiding it, you begin to see it differently. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this building in me? That shift in perspective turns every challenge into an opportunity. It doesn't make the struggle less difficult, but it makes it meaningful. And meaning is what keeps you going when motivation disappears. Obstacles are not just interruptions, they are invitations. Invitations to rise to a higher standard, to solve bigger problems, to create new strategies, to become more resilient. When you see an obstacle, you have two choices: see it as a wall or see it as a stepping stone. If you see it as a wall, you stop, you complain, you turn back. If you see it as a stepping stone, you climb on it, and from that higher ground, you see farther, you gain perspective, and you get closer to your vision. Every obstacle you conquer becomes part of your strength, part of your story, part of the foundation you stand on. The people who achieve extraordinary things are not the ones who had fewer obstacles. They are the ones who embrace them. They are the ones who understood that pain is not the enemy, it is the path. They let their failures refine them instead of define them. They let rejection toughen their spirit instead of shattering it. They let loss teach them gratitude, endurance, perspective. They turned their scars into symbols of resilience. Without obstacles, they would never have grown into who they became. Pain and obstacles also give you a unique advantage, empathy, and connection. When you have suffered, when you have struggled, when you have faced hardship, you gain an understanding of others that cannot be faked. You know what it feels like to fall, to hurt, to fight for something. That shared humanity connects you with people. It makes your leadership authentic. It makes your victories relatable. It allows you to lift others as you rise, because you are not speaking theory, you are speaking from lived experience. The most dangerous life you can live is not the one filled with obstacles. It is the one that is too easy, because ease breeds complacency, and complacency is the death of progress. If you never face resistance, you never grow. If you never struggle, you never discover how strong you are. If you never feel pain, you never feel the pride of overcoming it. Comfort zones may feel safe, but they are prisons disguised as paradise. Pain breaks you out of those prisons. Obstacles force you to move beyond them. Every time you face pain and push through it, you build trust with yourself. You prove to yourself that you can handle more than you thought. You expand your capacity. That trust becomes confidence. That confidence becomes courage. And that courage becomes unstoppable momentum. The very thing that felt like it was there to destroy you becomes the very thing that forged you into someone unbreakable. Your standards shape your destiny. Every person alive lives according to an invisible set of standards. Some people have high standards, some people have low standards, but everyone has them. Standards are not wishes. They are not goals. They are the non-negotiables, the baseline you demand of yourself in every situation. They dictate how much effort you give, how much discipline you show, how much resilience you bring to the table. They define what you will accept and what you will reject, not from the outside world, but from yourself. And because you always rise or fall to the level of your standards, they become the architecture of your future. Your destiny is not shaped by what you hope will happen. It is shaped by what you demand of yourself day after day. People often mistake goals for standards. A goal is something you want. A standard is something you will not live without. You can want to be fit, but if your standard is eating junk food and skipping workouts, your body will always reflect your standard, not your wish. You can want to be wealthy, but if your standard is settling for mediocrity, avoiding risk, and spending more than you earn, your bank account will reflect your standard, not your dream. You can want to have a great relationship, but if your standard is accepting neglect, disrespect, or lack of effort, then that relationship will never rise above the level of what you tolerate. Life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you are committed to, and your standards reveal what you are truly committed to. When you raise your standards, everything changes. Raising your standards is not about adding more desires to your list. It's about drawing a line in the sand and declaring, this is no longer acceptable in my life. That moment is powerful because it shifts your identity. When you demand more of yourself, you begin to act in alignment with that demand. And when your actions shift, your results inevitably shift. The truth is that most people don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they aim too low and hit. Their standards are so low that even when they succeed, it doesn't create fulfillment because deep down they know they are capable of more. Your standards are visible in your habits. Look at how you treat your body, your time, your money, your relationships. That is where your real standards lie. If your standard is excellence, it will show in how consistent you are, how intentional you are, how disciplined you are. If your standard is mediocrity, it will show in procrastination, excuses, shortcuts, and inconsistency. You cannot hide your standards. They show up in your results. That is why two people can have the same resources, the same opportunities, and the same goals, but create completely different outcomes. One demands excellence of themselves. The other accepts average. Destiny does not favor either one. It simply reflects their standards. Raising your standards requires courage because it means stepping away from comfort and into accountability. The moment you raise your standards, you eliminate your excuses. You can no longer justify failure by saying you didn't want it badly enough because now you have made it a must. When you make something a must, your mind shifts to how. It is no longer a question of whether it will happen. It is only a question of what strategy, what resource, what action will make it happen. That kind of thinking creates breakthroughs. When people say, I'll try, they are living in low standards. I'll try is weak. I'll do whatever it takes is the language of high standards. Every major achievement in history came from someone raising their standards. Leaders, innovators, athletes, creators, none of them were born extraordinary. They simply decided that they would no longer accept less than excellence from themselves. They demanded mastery, demanded growth, demanded results that matched their vision. And because their standards were higher than the people around them, they created lives that seemed impossible to others. What others called unrealistic, they called non-negotiable. That mindset is the difference. Standards are contagious. The people you spend time with will either pull your standards up or drag them down. If you surround yourself with people who settle, who tolerate mediocrity, who live in excuses, you will begin to lower your own standards without even realizing it. But if you surround yourself with people who push, who demand more, who expect greatness, your standards will rise just to stay in their presence. That is why environment is so critical. Your destiny is not just shaped by your personal standards, but also by the standards of those you allow in your circle. The danger of low standards is that they don't feel dangerous in the moment. They feel easy. They feel comfortable. But comfort is deceptive because while it feels safe now, it costs you everything later. Low standards steal your potential slowly. You don't notice it until years have passed and you are still in the same place, wondering what happened to the dreams you once had. High standards are uncomfortable in the moment, but they pay dividends for the rest of your life. They demand effort, sacrifice, and discipline, but they give you freedom, pride, and fulfillment. Every time you raise your standards, you raise your destiny. If you raise your standard for your health, your body will transform. If you raise your standard for your finances, your wealth will grow. If you raise your standard for your relationships, the quality of people in your life will improve. If you raise your standard for your mindset, your resilience will expand. There is no area of life that is not shaped by the standards you set. And the higher you set them, the more extraordinary your life becomes. Your standards are your true ceiling. You will never consistently outperform them. You might get lucky, you might experience temporary success, but you will always return to the level of what you demand of yourself. If your standard is excellence, you will eventually climb back up even after failure. If your standard is mediocrity, you will eventually sink back down even after a lucky break. That is why raising your standards is the most important decision you can ever make. Because once you do, your destiny has no choice but to follow. Life gives you what you fight for, not what you want. People misunderstand this truth over and over. They believe that wanting something badly enough is the same as deserving it, but the world does not operate on desire alone. Everyone wants success, everyone wants freedom, everyone wants happiness, but not everyone is willing to fight for it. Desire is common, fight is rare. That is why so few achieve the life they dream of while the majority settle for less. The universe responds to effort, not daydreams. It responds to persistence, not mere wishes. The gap between what you want and what you have is bridged by how much you are willing to endure, how much you are willing to push, how much you are willing to refuse defeat. Think about people you admire, athletes, leaders, inventors, creators. None of them achieved their vision simply because they wanted it more than others. They achieved it because they fought for it more than others. They endured more setbacks, took more risks, sacrificed more comfort, pushed through more criticism. While others stopped at the first sign of resistance, they leaned into it. Their fight became their identity. They didn't just want success. They demanded it through relentless action. That is the difference. Life doesn't bend to wishes, it bends to will. The fight is not glamorous. It doesn't look like the highlight reels people post. It looks like late nights when no one is watching. It looks like failure after failure with no guarantee of success. It looks like sweat, doubt, pain, and repetition. The fight tests your spirit more than your skills. It asks you again and again, how badly do you want this? Are you willing to keep going even now? Those who can answer yes, even when every part of them wants to quit, are the ones who eventually break through. The fight is what filters the dreamers from the doors. Wanting is passive. Fighting is active. When you want something, you imagine it. You think about it, you talk about it. But when you fight for something, you act. You put skin in the game. You put time, energy, and sometimes even everything you own on the line. Fighting is proof of commitment. It shows that this isn't just a fantasy to you. It is a necessity. Life respects necessity. When something becomes a must, not a maybe, you begin to find ways to achieve it. You discover strengths you didn't know you had. You uncover opportunities you would never have seen if you weren't in the fight. The act of fighting changes who you are and what you're capable of. Many people think they are unlucky because life hasn't given them what they wanted. But the truth is life didn't withhold anything. It simply responded to the level of fight they brought. The person who says they want a better body but gives up after 2 weeks of effort wasn't denied by life. They surrendered too soon. The person who says they want financial freedom but refuses to learn, refuses to sacrifice, refuses to risk, wasn't cheated by life. They avoided the fight. The person who says they want love but accepts disrespect, neglect, or half-hearted effort isn't cursed. They simply haven't fought for the standard they deserve. Life is fairer than most believe. It gives back in proportion to the fight you're willing to give. Every fight will demand a price. That price may be time. It may be energy. It may be rejection. It may be failure. It may be nights of uncertainty. The price is never cheap, but it is always worth it. The question is not whether life is willing to give you what you want. The question is whether you are willing to pay the price it asks. Most people underestimate the price, and when they realize how much it costs, they retreat. But the few who understand that greatness requires sacrifice, that victory requires endurance, that rewards require risk, those are the ones who keep fighting until the breakthrough comes. Fighting also changes your relationship with failure. When you are only focused on wanting, failure feels like the end. It feels like proof that you cannot achieve what you desire. But when you are fighting, failure becomes feedback. It becomes part of the process, a necessary step in the journey. You see every loss not as evidence that you should quit, but as information that sharpens your approach. You adapt, you adjust, you improve. The fight teaches you resilience, and resilience is the true currency of success. Without resilience, you stop before the miracle happens. With resilience, you keep showing up until it does. The fight also reveals your true capacity. Most people never discover how strong they really are because they never push themselves far enough. They stop at discomfort, they retreat at rejection, they quit at the first major obstacle. But those who stay in the fight long enough realize that their limits were illusions. They realize they can handle more than they thought, endure more than they believed, achieve more than they imagined. The fight doesn't just give you the outcome you wanted, it transforms you into the kind of person who can sustain that outcome. That is why it is not just about the result, but about the process. Life doesn't respect half-hearted effort. It doesn't respond to "I'll try." It responds to "I will." It responds to persistence that refuses to back down. It responds to courage that keeps showing up despite fear. It responds to discipline that stays the course even when the excitement fades. Every time you fight, you send a message to yourself and to the world: this matters, and I will not stop until I have it. That energy creates opportunities, attracts allies, and eventually bends reality in your favor. The fight itself generates momentum, and momentum is what carries you across the finish line. The world is filled with people who want. Very few are filled with people who fight. That is why results seem so unevenly distributed. It is not about talent, not about luck, not about background. It is about who is willing to keep swinging long after others have dropped their hands. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often just one more round in the fight. The ones who win are not always the ones who hit the hardest, but the ones who refuse to stop swinging. Decide, don't wish, don't hope. Decide. A single decision can change the entire trajectory of a life. Yet most people drift through their days trapped in endless wishing and hoping. They say they want change. They say they want success. They say they want freedom, but they never decide. Wishing is passive, hoping is uncertain, but deciding is final. When you decide, you cut off all other possibilities. You make a commitment so deep that quitting is no longer an option. That level of clarity and conviction creates a power that wishing and hoping will never touch. Decisions shape destiny because they set the standard of who you are and what you will no longer tolerate. Every person has moments when they are faced with a choice. They can continue as they are, or they can step into something greater. In those moments, the temptation is to delay, to say someday, to say maybe later, to say, I hope it works out. But every delay is a decision to remain the same. People fool themselves by believing they are waiting for the right time. But the truth is they are avoiding the pain of commitment. Deciding means taking responsibility, and responsibility is heavy. It means if you fail, you own it. It means if you fall short, there is no one else to blame. That is why so many hide in wishing and hoping, because wishing costs nothing, but deciding costs everything. The difference between those who create extraordinary lives and those who don't is not intelligence, talent, or even luck. It is the ability to decide. The moment someone decides, their energy shifts, their focus sharpens, their behavior changes. They begin to align their actions with their decision, and that alignment creates momentum. Even if they start with nothing, the act of deciding generates movement. Without decision, nothing happens. With decision, everything begins. The most successful people in history were not the ones who hoped things would work out. They were the ones who decided things would work out and then acted until it was true. A decision is not just a thought. It is not a preference. It is not a statement of desire. A real decision is backed by action. If you say you've decided but nothing in your life changes, you didn't decide, you only wished. Decisions demand proof. They demand that you align your behavior with your choice. When you truly decide to be healthy, you don't keep eating in ways that destroy your body. When you decide to succeed financially, you don't keep wasting money and time on distractions. When you decide to build meaningful relationships, you don't keep settling for people who don't value you. Decisions force you to cut off the old patterns that no longer match the life you've chosen. Most people live in hesitation. They analyze, they overthink, they wait for certainty. But certainty never comes before decision. It comes after. You don't wait for the path to be clear before you start walking. You start walking and the path becomes clear. When you decide, you step into uncertainty with courage, and that very courage creates the clarity you were waiting for. People who wait for guarantees never move. People who decide create their own guarantees by refusing to quit. The power of decision also comes from identity. When you decide, you are not just choosing an outcome, you are choosing who you are. A person who decides to be disciplined is no longer the same as a person who wishes to be disciplined. Their self-image changes. They see themselves as someone who follows through, someone who honors their word, someone who finishes what they start. That identity shift is what makes the decision stick. When you see yourself differently, you behave differently, and when you behave differently, your results change. Decisions also collapse time. Wishing and hoping stretch things out endlessly because there is no urgency. You can wish for years, you can hope for decades, and nothing will change. But when you decide, time shrinks. You set deadlines, you take bold action, you stop procrastinating. You no longer waste energy debating what to do because the decision is already made. All that is left is execution. That is why a single decision can accomplish in months what years of wishing could never produce. Greatness is always born from decisions that look impossible at first, to leave security for a vision, to step away from the known into the unknown, to risk reputation, comfort, or stability for something greater. These decisions are never easy, but they are always defining. The moment you decide, you draw a line in the sand and declare that the old life is no longer enough. That line becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Every time you feel weak, every time you feel doubt, you return to that line and remember the decision you made. That memory keeps you in the fight when wishing and hoping would have let you quit. Decisions also create influence. When people see someone who has truly decided, they are drawn to that certainty. They feel the conviction radiating from them. Leaders are not followed because they are the smartest or the most talented, but because they have made decisions and others trust their conviction. A clear decision is magnetic. It attracts resources, opportunities, and people. Uncertainty repels, but decision pulls. That is why the most decisive people often end up with the greatest support, because the world responds to clarity. Every breakthrough you want in life is waiting on a decision to stop tolerating what has held you back, a decision to raise your standards, a decision to risk failure, a decision to act now, not later. You do not need another book, another seminar, another piece of advice before your life changes. You need a decision. Until you decide, nothing shifts. After you decide, everything shifts. That is the raw power of choice.